moving into the second part, which is how are we going to make change, and why is the system so messed up? Why are we trying to go to war with Iran when the Ayatollah has issued a fatwa against nuclear weapons, when the CIA consistently says in their national intelligence estimate that Iran has abandoned any efforts to weaponize their nuclear program for over a decade? Why are we still trying to go to war with Iran when there is a really great agreement that you couldn't ask for anything much more aggressive on our part? Why are there people still pushing for a war? And I think that the answers are pretty easy to come by, and I think most people understand why our foreign policy is what it is right now. But I want to reinforce that. So I'm going to talk a little bit about our electoral system. We've had a number of Supreme Court decisions about the rights of corporations and the ability to use money to influence elections. Buckley versus Vallejo. There have been a handful of other decisions in the 70s and 80s, most recently Citizens United. And what essentially we've come to is that corporations have the rights of free speech of people, and that the rights of free speech include being able to spend your money on political speech, and that money is unlimited, that you cannot have limitations on how much money you are spending to make political speech. In 94% of federal elections, the person who raises the most money wins. 94% of the time, if you raise more money, you win. In 5.97%, roughly, if you raise the second most amount of money, you win. That means, as we know, we have this two-party system, and it's about which party raises more money. That's who gets to win in any given state. Raises and spends more money. But to be taken seriously in that party, you have to prove that you're going to be able to raise more money than the other guy. You're going to have to be, if you want to be taken seriously, you need to show that you're going to raise that money, and you need to start by raising that money, which means you need to convince the people who donate the money that you're someone who's got their back. So who are the people who donate the money? When you look at where the money comes from, if you start with the largest donors at the top and you put the smallest donors at the bottom, when you get to 60% of the dollars, 60%, in federal elections in the last cycle, there are 240 names on that first 60%. 240 individuals in the country. And that's individuals and corporations. When I say individuals, of course, corporations are people, my friend, so they are included. So 240 people who are on that list. For the top 60%, you can never, ever, ever be taken seriously for federal office unless those 240 people, many of which, I won't say most of which, but many of which are funding both parties. We hear a lot about the Koch brothers and how they're the problem. The Koch brothers are funding the Republicans. The Koch brothers also were founding top funders of the Senate, I believe it's called the Senate Democratic Leadership Caucus. The reality is that American sugar is famous for funding both sides of every election. There are many countries, many companies, many individual interests that fund both sides. And even when you take that out, when you look at when you aggregate, when you look at who these 240 people are, they're all working for the same groups of people. Most of them, J.P. Morgan Chase, Bank of America. We're talking about large banks. When you look at the top, when you aggregate, you say, who are the people who are making these donations and where do they work? When you aggregate, you find that the list of top 10 funders for John McCain and Barack Obama in 2008, 7 out of 10 are the same list. They're the same companies, the same interests. If you weren't going to do what all of the senior vice presidents of Bank of America wanted you to do, you were not going to be a top contender for the presidential office in 2008 when there was an expectation of bailouts. You needed to be right where they needed you to be. Otherwise, you were never going to be taken seriously. We talk about it as corruption, and I think that that's fair, but I don't think it's always the most accurate way to describe it. You can never be taken seriously unless you've got those 240 people's interest in mind, at hand. You need to convince them to give you the money so that you can be taken seriously. That's the reality of our political system and how it functions. Now, that really it includes a handful of interests that you need to be on board with. There are banks, who are probably number one. The banks are the largest funder. There are military-industrial complexes. The largest industry. We don't have a lot of industry in the U.S. anymore. Most of it's been shipped overseas. But we do have one industry that we are number one in, and by a wide margin, and that is military contracting. Making bombs, tanks, guns, helicopters, gunships, planes, jets. That is where that is our industry. And if you don't have America's only industry with you, you're not going anywhere. You cannot. How many people in the Senate can make it to? How many people do we have in the Senate? Anybody have a? Can you name a senator who is with peace ever? A U.S. senator? No, there are no U.S. senators who aren't taking money from the military-industrial complex. There are a few House reps. Walter Jones and Ron Paul on the Republican side. Ron Paul's not in anymore. On the Democratic side, there are probably a good dozen anyway. Barbara Lee and McGovern, and when we had Kucinich, there was Kucinich. There are usually a good dozen who managed to sneak their way in without doing the military-industrial complex's bidding. But you can't make it to the Senate without those dollars. AIPAC and NORPAC, and I do not conflate what AIPAC and NORPAC do with Israel's interest, and I do not conflate it with Judaism in any way. What AIPAC and NORPAC do is further the agendas of the Likud party. They are both heavily tied in, and they are both enormous electoral funders. I do not, I don't think it's fair. I know a lot of people who are Jewish who are not supporting AIPAC and NORPAC, who are not supporting. NORPAC is very much what AIPAC is. It's a very similar outfit. It has less funders. It does less fundraising to a broad base. It has almost as much money. NORPAC's role tends to be in a race like our two Senate races ago in New Hampshire. We had Paul Hodes, who is a founding member of New Hampshire Peace Action. He was a strong progressive Democrat. He's also Jewish and has had a very strong, he's not in office anymore, but had a very strong relationship with AIPAC and took a lot of money from AIPAC. And so AIPAC endorsed him. NORPAC's role is when AIPAC's got a candidate and there's a candidate that's opposing that won't be funded by AIPAC but has similar views, in this case Kelly Ayotte, they come in and make sure that they've got money to be aligned with Likud's policies as well.
So it's all planned out?
I think so, yeah. I think that, and NORPAC will frequently fund folks who AIPAC are funding as well, but they make sure that that nobody's going to make it to that level without getting those dollars to make sure that they're listening to what Likud has to say. And I don't think that that's an unfair statement. I certainly, I have done some introspection on this, and I don't think there's any anti-Semitism when I talk about that. I think that this is whenever somebody says racism, sexism, homophobia, I think we need to stop, pause everything, and be like, oh wait, is that in me? Is that in me? Like I need to take a look. If you're saying that's there, I need to look. I don't see it in myself. I try to be pretty introspective. I've talked this over with my therapist, and I don't see it. Anyway, so that's one of the main interests. There are the reality, and I'm going to stop there because those are the ones that are really relevant when we're talking. I mean, oil, obviously oil, but we'll stop with those. Those are three industries that you can't do without. You cannot be taken seriously for office without them, which is why our foreign policy is what it is. Now, does that, we say, but wait a minute, there are a lot of people who believe we should attack Iran, right? There are plenty of people out there who think that Iran is a danger. Why do they think that? That's a really insane opinion, if you ask me. When you read I have read the CIA intelligence estimates on Iran. They have not had a nuclear weapons program since 2003. We are confident of that. It's clear we have some folks in their program. There's a fatwa, a religious law, not to pursue nuclear weapons. If anybody was caught trying to pursue nuclear weapons in Iran, they would be beheaded. This is a scary thing. Nobody is pursuing nuclear weapons in Iran, and they haven't been in a long time. This deal, talk about aggressive. It's like, we may relax some sanctions, and you're going to give us half your enrichment facilities. You're going to stop anything above 20%. And we're going to inspect everything. Everything. Full inspection. Full verification. That's about as aggressive as it can get. It's impossible to actually make an argument that you should oppose that. That's Iran will never have a nuclear weapon if this deal goes through. How is that not in the interest of the U.S.? How is that not in the interest of Israel to ensure that Iran never has a nuclear weapon? That is, and it is the only path that ensures that. There is no other path that gives us assurance that Iran's never going to develop a nuclear weapon. But there are people who believe that if this agreement holds, if it makes it through and we start to honor it, that we're going to end up with a nuclear weapon in New York City from the Iranians. There are people who believe it. And how and why? And the answer is pretty simple. It's our media, and it's like, well, don't we have a free press in this country? Don't we have? I've heard we have a liberal media. That's a phrase. It's people say that. People say the liberal media, right? Well, how is this possible? Who is the largest beneficiary? And just throw your hand up if you have the answer of our electoral funding. Who gets all those dollars? The media. They're the ones making the money, and then they make a lot more money when their ratings go up on those shows that they're selling ad space on. And excitement and war is what makes those ratings go up. So the media is kind of a part of this whole thing that is, they're kind of the ones who are making the real bank off of it. These folks are very complicit. And most of the companies that are media conglomerates are pretty well tangled up with a lot of folks who are making a lot of money off of war and militarism. So, are you depressed? Sorry, I'm talking about depression. I'm talking about coming home from Iraq, and I'm talking about how hopeless it seems. Okay, so this is the part that you're gonna be a little surprised by. We're gonna change this. I know that sounds really a little bit crazy, maybe, after I've explained how entrenched and moneyed this system is, and how absolute the power of those 240 individuals who are calling the shots when it comes to our politics are. Anybody have grandkids or kids who are, say, under 20? Yeah. Have you had conversations with them? They are smart. They know things that blow me away. I've been working with youth as one of my, since I took over at Peace Action, it's been one of my things that people are like, there's no money in working with youth. Why are you working with youth? You need to be, hitting up the donors and doing things that the donors are into. And I'll say the donors are actually pretty into working with youth after you get going a little bit and they start seeing youth faces at events. But one of the things that just blows me away is when I go to a meeting and I try to explain some of this stuff to them, they fill me in on the rest of it that I didn't know about. They're reading. They are finding their own media. They don't watch network TV. When they need the news, they go to Huffington Post, they go to Glenn Greenwald, they go find the truth, and they recognize it when they see it, and most of their friends do too. The idea that, I know we all hate how we're all buried in our cell phones, everybody's on Facebook. The reality is we are developing external networks of media. We are finding new ways to communicate. We are finding new ways to communicate across international borders. We're talking to Iranian civilians. We are finding ways to translate, and translation technology is huge. People are talking to other people all over the world. And we talk about this problem in the U.S. because we're Americans and we happen to live here. But it's a global problem. The other thing is it's a longitudinal problem. This is not something new. This is not post-Buckley and Vallejo. It's not post-Citizens United. We live in a world where there has been an age-old struggle of the wealthy and powerful trying to control the poor and powerless, for control of resources, for control of water, for control of food, for comfort, for technology. And this is, it's an age-old struggle. For a long, long time, there was this thing called slavery, where one person said they could own another or own many others. And there still is slavery. I shouldn't say there was, because obviously there's still slavery. But it's universally illegal now. And I bet a couple hundred years ago, if you had said to someone like me who was an abolitionist, you are crazy. You're never going to see a world without slavery. Slavery is just part of being human. It's part of what we do. We've always done slavery. The abolitionist probably would have said something like, I'll say to you after I tell you that we're going to abolish war. No, that's false. We will abolish slavery. And in their heart of hearts, they would have thought, maybe not, though. Maybe it is part of human nature. There have been struggles after struggles after struggles through human history, through feudalism, slavery, women's rights, the civil rights movement, where people rise up, and they rise up for each other, and they find ways to make a more just world. And it's happened over and over and over again because that's who we are as a species. That is what humans do. I'm saying this because I know I have to believe it. Just like I had to believe that there was something good and true and just about Iraq. But I actually think it's true. When I come out of a youth meeting, my feeling is when these kids get there, when they're the ones calling the shots, it's going to be okay. We're going to fix this. That being said, I don't know if we're going to fix it this year. I don't know if we're going to fix it in my lifetime. I have a 2-year-old daughter. Oh my God, I did not know that you could love somebody as much as I love Aurora. People are like, oh, it changes you. I'm like, yeah, whatever, it changes me. I believe you. Oh my God, it changes you having a baby. I certainly hope that we can be part of a movement to abolish war sometime in her lifetime at least. Because I'll tell you what, war is it's always prefaced as something that's about freedom or about democracy as it's being defined by the powers that be, or it's about human rights as it's being defined by the powers that be. But it's always about wealthy and powerful people controlling poor and powerless people and making them fight each other for control of wealth and resources. And that's not okay. It's the same as slavery. It is a basic moral fact that it is wrong, that humans should not be pitted against each other and made to kill each other for the wealth and power of the few. And that's what war is, and everybody knows it. And all we need to do is make sure that our consciousness takes that step. And I know that you may feel like, well, that's a big step. We're a ways away from that. We still have Rand Paul. You think we're going to get there? But I remember 8 years ago when I started volunteering for Dennis Kucinich, one of the reasons was that he and Mike Gravel were the only two candidates in either party who were saying, you know what, I think gay people should be able to get married. Everybody else was saying, well, civil unions, the Democrats, most of them, civil unions are okay, but marriage is a holy thing that, we really shouldn't allow. You think we're going to have Democrats coming into the field this year daring to say gay people should not be allowed to get married? You'd be kicked out so fast you wouldn't, your head would spin. And if you told me 8 years ago that 8 years from now, more than half the states in the U.S. will allow gay marriage, I'm like, you're crazy. You're nuts. And so what I'm trying to say is this. Our system is messed up. I haven't even touched on global warming. Holy smokes, California is in trouble. Our global food system is in trouble. People are going to die. We're going to have more wars. I don't know that we're going to be able to stop the U.S. from going in after ISIS, which I hope we have some questions on ISIS, because I'd love to talk about ISIS and what exactly that is and how exactly we are going to be able to move forward in a constructive way there. We have some smart kids coming up. We have new ways of communicating. The world is changing very quickly, and the amount that we are able to put into this fight in money to nonprofits like Peace Action Maine, like PeaceWorks, the Global Network to keep nuclear weapons out of space, like Bruce's nonprofit. The amount of time we can put in to going out and holding a sign, to handing out leaflets on tax day, that's what dictates how many coral atolls we lose. It's what dictates how many people starve because our global food system is going to collapse on some level. It may not collapse all the way. How many people can we save? How many children can we keep from being bombed to death in Iraq, in Syria, in Ukraine, in Russia? How many lives can we save? How much radiation can we keep out of our air, out of our soil? How hard can we work? We are going to win. Father Roy Bourgeois was our annual event speaker last summer, and he said something that really, and I've never been an overly religious person until recently, anyway. And he said to our gathering, these movements, the movement to abolish slavery, the movement for equal rights for women, the movement for civil rights, the movement to abolish the death penalty, the movement to abolish war, these movements are unstoppable because they are based in truth, they are based in humanity, and they are based in the Spirit. And every hair on my body stood up when he said that because I knew it was true. So I would love to open this up as a conversation now that I've babbled for a good hour. And that's these parts. 11 years ago, right now, I was in Iraq. I was pointing guns at cars, pushing vehicles off the road with my Humvee. In those vehicles, there were families. There were men, there were women, there were children. There were 8 and 9 and 10-year-old boys. That was 11 years ago, and they are now 19, 20, 21, and they are pissed off because I pushed their car off the road, I shot their father, I pointed guns at their mother, I destroyed their country, and I made their entire family grow up under stress. And this is obviously not just me. This is thousands and thousands of U.S. soldiers and bombs and ordnance. And there are some people who are really, really pissed off. And it's not just in Iraq. We've bombed Yemen, Sudan, Somalia, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Syria. We have dropped ordnance, and there are a lot of people who are looking for any way they can to fight the empire. And ISIS is providing that. Number 2, we're providing them with guns and arms. When last year, the Obama administration said that the red line had been crossed and we needed to go to war with Syria against Assad, we, the peace movement, rose up, and it just so happened that our friends, the right-wingers, who were willing to do just about anything to embarrass President Obama, rose up with us, and together we formed the weirdest coalition in history, and we stopped a war. But the military contractors needed their cut, because if the Senate and the House weren't going to be able to politically make a war with Assad feasible, they still needed their quarterly stock returns. So we dumped weapons into Syria. And we did not, I don't remember, if you remember, but there was a a Facebook super viral post, and it said, Glenn Beck is officially the best peace activist in the country. And this is Glenn Beck talking about who we were giving weapons to. And he was pointing out that we were giving weapons to people who were beheading, who were torturing, who were cutting out organs and eating them to establish fear, who were executing Syrian soldiers regularly. We knew very well that the people we were arming and funding in Syria were the very most violent folks there. But somebody had to make sure those profits were still getting to the military contractors. So I can't say what the CIA's role in this all has been, because I don't know. And I wouldn't speculate. What ISIS is right in front of your nose. Like what the rank and file of ISIS is a people that have been traumatized and experienced immense loss due to American foreign policy, who are looking for something to save them from this cycle of perpetual war that the U.S. seems to be locked into in the Middle East. I guess I might as well, from there, Bruce, go right into how do we deal with ISIS in the most productive way. People frequently, when I would, early on, when I first got involved with the peace movement, people would say, well, what do we do with Iraq now? Like, there's all this violence, there's this sectarian violence, everybody's killing everybody. Don't we need to be there? And they'd say, what's your solution? If you say we need to pull out, what's your solution? There are going to be mass slaughters if we just pull out of Iraq. And we have to look at what the least bad options are. Number one, I want to keep my baby safe. I want to keep my family safe. I want to keep my community safe. That is an absolute truth that I think everybody agrees. We want to stay safe. Number two, we want to see ISIS stop killing innocents in the Middle East. I think that it's a human values issue, just like abolishing war. We don't want to see any more of that. So what can we do to make sure that ISIS doesn't grow? To make sure that they don't get any more arms, that they don't get any more money? How do we do what we can to deflate that? So number one, there are plenty of people who hate us. There are a lot of people who hate ISIS too, because they are not doing things diplomatically, shall we say. So there are local powers who will deal militarily with ISIS. And I don't know, here I am, New Hampshire Peace Action, I'm supposed to always advocate peace. I don't know that there's going to be a way to end ISIS without there being some violence. There's going to be violence. But I think that any time the U.S. is the one doing that violence, if we send troops, if we drop bombs, that is giving ISIS the fuel they need to recruit. That is exactly what ISIS is thriving on. Number two, why are we dumping in arms and money? We are still dumping in arms and money into anti-Assad movements that we think are maybe the moderate factions. What is a moderate rebel? You're talking about people who are raising up and collecting arms to fight their government. What does the moderate faction look like? Do the folks who are doing the arming actually have any idea where it's going? We do know that the vast majority of the weapons, ammunition, and equipment that ISIS has is provided by the U.S., that it is U.S. equipment that we are putting in. So we need to make sure that we are not fighting, that we are not arming them. And then I think anytime it is the nation that is going to be engaging militarily with ISIS, if it is a nation and not a group, for instance, the Kurds have been engaging ISIS, we need to make sure they don't look like an American proxy, because that's going to be the same fuel that ISIS needs. And so what are those nations that maybe aren't going to be seen as American proxies, who we can try to have a diplomatic relationship with to help deflate this situation? Jordan, certainly. Egypt, are you kidding me? Egypt just went through a revolution and a half, maybe a revolution and 3/4, almost 2 revolutions. They're completely unstable. They don't have an organized military, and if they did, they wouldn't know who was running it. Egypt is not a reliable partner. Certainly Saudi Arabia, it seems very likely that Saudi Arabia are at least covertly supporting ISIS, There have been multiple folks who have come out saying, look, Saudi Arabia is definitely involved in this. Saudi Arabia is also viewed as a U.S. proxy. They're the absolute worst option for us. Yemen, 2 civil wars plus an invasion right now from neighboring nations, which maybe the current government that we're recognizing is with the invasion. They support it. I'm not sure. We have Afghanistan. Give me a break. They've been bombed and destroyed by us for the last, 13 years now? 14 years? Iraq. Don't even get started on Iraq. We just talked about Iraq. So you have the Kurds, which are not a nation. You have Jordan. Definitely Jordan is going to be part of this solution. And you have Iran. And Iran are providing training and arms and security to the current Iraqi government. And Iran is not seen as a U.S. proxy. And if we don't have Iran as part of this solution, it's going to be uglier. And I don't think that there's a pretty solution. There's not a nice way that ISIS is going to go away. It's what's going to lead to the least innocent deaths is what I think we should be looking at. So other things we can do. We can stop the flow of arms because we're providing the arms. We can stop the flow of oil. We can make sure that the oil wells that ISIS are controlling are not getting out through the black market. Don't tell me that with that massive budget the CIA and NSA have, that they can't figure out which oil is coming from ISIS and shut it off. We can embargo and we can sanction Iran and any other nation we want, but we can't stop the flow of oil. Bullshit. Number 3, ancient antiquities. One of ISIS's main sources of funding is ancient antiquities on the black market. And again, with our intelligence, ancient antiquities on the black market. Ancient antiquities. A lot of ancient artifacts from Iraq are being sold on the black market for cash through ISIS and creating that funding. And again, with our intelligence apparatus, we can do a lot more to stop that funding. So I don't know what the solution is going to look like. It is a horrible mess, but I do know that we can be very clear about what's going to make it worse, and that is U.S. troops.